I'm not exaggerating, folks. The newsrooms and the networks all over America are celebrating. A tropical storm has become a hurricane off the coast of Louisiana, and they are happy. They can't believe it. Their wildest dreams have come true. And what are those wildest dreams? Poor people get wiped out. Apparently, the Democrat Party, which cares so much about the poor, the Democrat Party, the media, with all their compassion for the downtrodden and the hungry and the thirsty, are excited beyond their ability to contain themselves at the idea that they might suffer. Yes, a hurricane's going to pour in there, Category 1, death, destruction. What a great day, they say. But who lives in New Orleans? A bunch of Democrats. Apparently, folks, the Democrat Party doesn't care how many people suffer if it'll help their political agenda. The media doesn't care how many people will suffer if it allows them to ratchet up their assault on the Republicans, who supposedly don't care because they're going ahead with their convention. In the old days, I was thinking about this earlier, in the old days, the early days of this program, we laughed at all this stuff. Every time one of these inane things happened with the media, we laughed at it. You know why we laughed at it? Because it was absurd. We thought everybody recognized that it was absurd. Everybody's going to laugh with us. Now we still laugh, but we think, how many morons are falling for this now? Is what we ask now. We used to be confident that all this crap would be seen through. Now we're not. I don't know if you've heard this or not. You know, at Penn State, during home football games, one of the traditions since the early 70s, maybe even late 60s, has been to play Sweet Caroline by Neil Diamond. Song came out in 1969. Neil Diamond, by the way, recently confirmed that the song was inspired by Caroline Kennedy. He's sitting in a motel room in Memphis, starving. Career wasn't doing all that. He had a couple hits, but thank the Lord for the nighttime, cherry, cherry, but it hadn't really taken off. And in less than an hour, he wrote the lyrics and the music to Sweet Caroline. That song has been picked up and it's played at sports stadiums all across the country, including at Penn State, which has announced that no longer are they going to play Sweet Caroline at home football games. They're not going to play. You know why? Because in the song, there's a lyric line that says, touching me, touching you. They fear that that will be related to Sandusky. Now, in fairness, we must always be fair. Penn State officials are denying that that's the reason. They are saying it's just time to update playlist. Playlist, we've had the same playlist here for years. It's gotten stale. We need to update it. New songs during home football games. But people doubt that. The people think it really is. They're just so politically correct and so frightened now of the Sandusky thing that they got to get rid of that song because of the lyrics, touching me, touching you. Sweet Caroline. Here's how you do a convention. We're going back to July 17, 1980 in Detroit, Michigan. A convention which nominated Ronaldus Magnus. At this convention, Jimmy Carter, who was the sitting president, was eviscerated. Now, Jimmy Carter wasn't black, and so at that time there were no allegations that criticizing Carter equaled racism. But I'll guarantee you that at that time, Republicans were every bit as racist as they are today, according to the allegations of the media and the Democrats. I paid close attention in 1980. I paid close attention all during the 80s. Reagan was every bit as despised as George W. Bush or any other Republican. And Reagan was a racist, sexist, bigot, homo. Reagan was responsible for AIDS, by the way. And you know why Reagan was responsible? Because he didn't talk about it. And because he didn't talk about it, the disease kept on spreading. They said this. My point is they did everything they could to shut Reagan up. They did everything they could to frighten Reagan. They did everything they could to get Reagan to be quiet about Jimmy Carter. The only thing they couldn't do was call it racism because Carter wasn't black. Here's Ronald Reagan telling the nation, July 17th, 1980, the truth about Jimmy Carter, the Democrat Party, and the country.
The major issue of this campaign is the direct political, personal, and moral responsibility of Democratic Party leadership in the White House and in the Congress for this unprecedented calamity which has befallen us. I will not stand by and watch this great country destroy itself under mediocre leadership that drifts from one crisis to the next, eroding our national will and purpose. Back in 1976, Mr. Carter said, "Trust me," and a lot of people did. And now many of those people are out of work.
And by the way, it was Mr. Carter throughout this speech, not President Carter. The Democrats and the media all demand that Obama be referred to as Mr. President. President Obama. That's not how Reagan did it. Here's the next soundbite.
Many have seen their savings eaten away by inflation. Many others on fixed incomes, especially the elderly, have watched helplessly as the cruel tax of inflation wasted away their purchasing power. And today, a great many who trusted Mr. Carter wonder if we can survive the Carter policies of national defense. Trust Me government asks that we concentrate our hopes and dreams on one man, that we trust him to do what's best for us. Well, my view of government places trust not in one person or one party, but in those values that transcend persons and parties.
Why, folks, notice how relevant that speech remains. This is Reinaldus Magnus in 1980 rejecting the idea that we should put our hopes and dreams in one man. Back then it was Jimmy Carter. Today it's Barack Hussein Obama. And yet that's what the Democrats' message is. Put your hopes and your dreams and your trust in one man, like you did 4 years ago. And Reagan said, hell with that. We don't put our hopes and dreams and trust in one man or in government. We invest our hopes and dreams in ourselves. We are the ones who make them happen. Mr. Carter is not going to make your dreams come true, nor is Mr. Obama. The United States government is not going to make your dreams come true. Only you can do that. That was Reagan's simple message, and it still applies. Amazingly so. Now, this convention was held during the Iranian hostage crisis. There were 54 Americans being held hostage at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. Reagan was not afraid to criticize Carter and call him a liar. And he certainly would not have let a rainstorm stop him.
We are given weakness when we need strength, vacillation when the times demand firmness. The Carter administration lives in a world of make-believe, every day drawing up a response to that day's troubles, regardless of what happened yesterday and what will happen tomorrow. But you and I live in a real world where disasters are overtaking our nation without any real response from Washington. This is make-believe, self-deceit, and above all, transparent hypocrisy.
Wow, it doesn't sound like Reagan was dialing it back, any. Doesn't sound like Reagan was afraid to tell the truth about Jimmy Carter. Doesn't sound like Reagan was afraid to tell the American people what their options were, what their choices were in that election. Doesn't sound to me like Reagan backed off. Doesn't sound to me like Reagan was afraid of what the media was going to say about him after the speech. And I'll tell you, at that convention was in Detroit in 1980, July 17th, when Reagan made this speech. There was nothing good about Jimmy Carter at that convention. The Republicans didn't spend time talking about what a nice guy he was, didn't spend time talking about what a Yes, a good old jovial old game. He just didn't know what he's doing. There wasn't any of that. Jimmy Carter had not one good thing said about him in that election, and if you'll recall, Reagan won that election in a landslide. If you had to attach a theme to the Republican convention in 1980, it would be, we've had enough of Jimmy Carter. Here's Reagan one last time.
Can anyone look at the record of this administration and say, well done? Can anyone compare the state of our economy when the Carter administration took office with where we are today and say, keep up the good work? Can anyone look at our reduced standing in the world today and say, let's have 4 more years of this? I believe the American people are going to answer these questions as you've answered them in the first week in November, and their answer will be, no, we've had enough.
Renaldus Magnus in 1980 in Detroit, July 17th, at the Republican National Convention. Every day, exactly right, everyday language. Everyday language, not what you would call soaring rhetoric, but everyday language. It was Reagan that came up with, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? But anybody say, we want more of this? Anybody out there say, we want 4 more years of this? Anybody out there saying, well done to any of this? And of course, no, nobody was saying well done to any of it. By the way, this morning at the White House, President Obama spoke about federal preparations for tropical, hurricane. It's a hurricane now. Isaac, here's a portion of our dear leader's remarks.
At my direction, FEMA has been on the ground for over a week, working with state and local officials in areas that could be affected, from Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands to Florida, and more recently, Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi. I approved a disaster declaration for the state of Louisiana so they can get the help that they need right away, particularly around some of the evacuations that are taking place. And right now, we already have response teams and supplies ready to help communities in the expected path of the storm.
I've been working on this for a week. I'm the guy who cares. I'm the guy desperately hoping this hurricane goes in there and breaks something so I can be seen as the guy fixing it. I hope people lose their homes. I hope there are floods. I'm a Democrat, and I live off other people's misery. Because I've got them all fooled into thinking I'm the one who fixes it.